Hi there. Welcome to episode 3 of the Maintenance Mindset. I'm Paul Rhodes. Today, our topic is an intriguing one. It's one that quite frequently in and around apartment maintenance gets very emotional on both sides, from the happy emotions to quite frequently very, very angry. You see, the topic was actually raised by a guy by the name of Derek, who wrote through our comment section on the Multifamily Media Network website. And what he asks is, I would like to see an episode that covers realistic maintenance team size versus the 1 per 100 standard. Now, that is a topic that really from the start gets very, very emotionally charged. I mean, doing some research, the National Apartment Association actually came out on June 8th of 2020. They put together a study or a document that, well, first, I guess we should note that it came out in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm not sure what effect that had on the data. Especially considering the data that they used or were citing came before the pandemic, but of course, being written during so might affect the bias. They did update it in 2022 that says some little bit different information. You see, what that article said is that the that our staffing numbers should be adjusted based upon resident satisfaction scores and the current ability and expanding ability to centralize using AI or chatbots or other technological solutions. Unfortunately, though, in the maintenance world, that will go only so far. Yes, it will help. More administration, more workflows, more things, and we'll actually talk about that a little bit later. But the article from 2020 that NAA put out, I thought it was very, very interesting that it said that it is a general rule. Actually, to be accurate, what they said is it's 2 per 100 units per property. And that means one person in the office and one person for maintenance for every 100 units. And the article does go on to get very specific about if you have less than 50, it's a good idea to have at least one part-timer represented by those 50 units. If it's over 50, go ahead and round up to make it a full person per 100 units. But, before we delve into this too deeply, I think it's important for us to notice something very specific. Have you ever heard of a philosophical razor? Now, I'm not talking about the kind of thing that I use to trim my fur on my face. A philosophical razor is a tool used in philosophy to simplify an issue. You may have heard of Occam's razor, which essentially what Occam's razor says is the simplest solution is most likely the best. Notice the terminology there, most likely. It's designed to make us look for simple ideas because quite frequently that is true. But again, the answer is quite frequently. Before we go delving really, really deep into the one maintenance technician per 100 units number, I would like to take you to something called Tarzwell's razor. And that is a razor that basically says the more emotional you feel, the less you should trust your judgment. Now, the reason why that's important is because I've been a part of a lot of conversations on both sides of this issue, from maintenance technicians who are overworked or challenged in the quantity of work, the quantity of work orders, the quantity of turns, the amount of things that they have to do and what they're responsible for, they're overwhelmed and they're looking for something to vent on. And the 1 per 100, that's an easy way to vent because it is a finite number. It's an easy thing to say that, you know what, at my property, I need help. And who was it that came up with this 1 per 100 anyway? On the opposite side, corporate is saying, 1 per 100. You know what? Maybe we should make it 1 per 120 or 1 per 150 or 1 per 200. The thing is, they're both correct and they're both wrong. The 1 per 100, it's important to to think about it like it is a general rule of thumb, meaning it works often, maybe not all the time. When it doesn't work, that's when we need more information. We need to get creative and we need some more ideas. I tend to look at it like swag. Now, swag is an acronym that gets used an awful lot in technician circles, and swag is short for scientific wild assumed guess. Because like the 1 per 100 rule, we tend to use a lot of swag in what we do. For instance, air conditioning. You know, over the years, teaching technicians how to perform air conditioning repairs, there is a lot of swag that's in use. I've actually heard maintenance technicians tell residents, your apartment will not get colder than 20 degrees below, excuse me, the outside temperature. I've heard them say that. Now, is that real? No, it's not real at all. As a matter of fact, your air conditioning system will get very cold. The question in that case is this: is the apartment insulated or maintaining heat loss in a way that prevents that heat from leaving or from gaining heat? So that's swag. It's true to an extent. There are things that residents can do to change that, but the reality is the swag is still there. Or how about this one? Have you ever heard a maintenance technician say you add refrigerant until the suction side or the large pipe is beer can cold? That's a swag too. And does it work? Yeah, less less than accurate, but it gets you in the ballpark. Chances are it's overcharged at that point, but it does work. Is it the best? No, it's not. What about, I actually had a guy in a class tell me once that he pulled a vacuum on a brand new system to remove all the non-condensables from that system. He pulled the vacuum until he finished his cigarette. And that's the time frame that he was given to pull a vacuum. And that I can tell you outright is completely and totally wrong. Uh, You pull a vacuum until all the moisture is removed. And the only way to know that is through testing or through a very, very long drawn out procedure, just to be absolutely certain, because it's really critical that we remove all the moisture. Oh, and possibly the biggest one, and this one is not swag. I mean, it's not even wag. Uh, it's using one of these, which for those of you just listening instead of looking at the video, it's an infrared gun. You know, it puts a red dot to wherever we want to aim for the infrared sensors to measure temperature. But the challenge is this measures surface temperature. And quite frequently, maintenance technicians use it to measure how effective the air conditioning is. The problem is this doesn't measure air. It measures the surface of the vent or the wall that's surrounding wherever that little dot is being aimed. And yet it gets used. Why? Well, one, a tool like that is very impressive to residents. It gives the illusion of accuracy. The problem is, it's not exactly right. It's kind of on the order of the 1 per 100 rule. It's swag, a scientific, wise, assumed guess. At the end, it's still a guess. We need to get accurate. I look at it this way. A few years ago, I was at a property down south of Houston, Texas, and it was in triple digits. It was over 100 degrees. Basically stupid hot. Eh, Your thermometer goes to stupid hot. Anything above 100 degrees is stupid. It's very, very hot. And because it's Houston, right there on the Gulf Coast, it was very moist. I mean, the humidity in the air was, you felt like you wanted to breathe through a sponge. Extremely uncomfortable. And the maintenance technician at this property was having a hard time charging a unit, adding refrigerant to a unit so that that unit would function correctly. And because when it was over 30 degrees, this upstairs apartment really needed air conditioning. It needed to be fixed. So I got to working on it, and we adjusted the refrigerant to get to the point of swag. You see, the indoor oil temperature was not exactly right, but I was getting the 18 to 20 degree temperature drop that I wanted to get across the coil. What that means is you take, when you're working on an air conditioner, a good rule of thumb, and actually is, you take the temperature of the air going into the return right before the air filter, where it's being drawn into the air handler itself. And then you take the air temperature after the coil, and you measure the difference between the two. Generally speaking, about 18 to 21 degrees is a good place to be. Well, we added refrigerant until it got to 70, which it's a lot of news, but that's another swag as well, to where you put it to 70 psi, and it's a shorthand to make that happen. We got it there. The pipe was not beer can cold, by the way, but that's beside the point. We went in and checked the temperature, so the drop, or delta T, that temperature before the return and after the system, the difference between there was 19 degrees. So I felt it was pretty good. The problem is the coil temperature. The physical temperature of the evaporating coil, which is the part that's inside the system, it wasn't quite right. It was still way too low. It was actually below freezing. And yet we had the swag. We had the delta T. We had that temperature drop. So I took out my psychrometer. Now, a psychrometer, this is a tool that maintenance technicians use to measure the amount of moisture in the air, the relative humidity, and to get the difference between dry bulb and wet bulb, which for accuracy is required. See, a lot of maintenance technicians, they may not have this particular tool. It can be expensive. There are now less expensive versions on the market that work very, very well. But I took this out, and what I determined was that we were not removing anywhere near the amount of humidity that we needed to. So then I got rid of swag for sure. What I actually did was I went to measure superheat. Now, superheat, when you're working on air conditioning systems, specifically refrigerant, it is used to determine the correct amount of refrigerant in this type of system, which was a split system. When I measured the superheat, I determined that the superheat in this case was way too high. You see, based on the manufacturer's standards, I needed 27 degrees of superheat. I had over 40 degrees, which what that means is I needed to add even more refrigerant. Now, the case in point here, and the reason why I bring this up and I'm going into such detail, is I use swag that on any other day, on most other days, at most properties, using those methods that I used, temperature drop, charging to 70 psi. By the way, it was a MO99 system, so it was close to R22 for those technical, like myself, nerds out there. That's what I was dealing with. On most other days, we could have called it good. New filter, clean coil, everything was great. Except if I would have stopped at swag, that apartment would not have cooled. There wasn't enough refrigerant present to remove the amount of heat load that that apartment was under. So I continued to look. I got rid of swag and went beyond it. In that instance, I had to add refrigerant. I had to add a significant amount more refrigerant. But eventually I got to the point to where I got to the 27 degrees of superheat that I needed. Now, once that superheat was correct, which is what the manufacturer says, my temperature drop was actually only 14 degrees, which is way below what was supposed to be happening. So, in other words, in this instance, based on manufacturer design and instructions, that was correct, and yet the swag was wrong. When we begin talking about this and we begin looking at these terms, it's a good idea for us to keep that in mind. First of all, we need to be sure that we're following what the manufacturer says whenever we perform this work. A portion of the maintenance mindset is going back to the manufacturer. How is this, whatever it is, supposed to be serviced? What is it supposed to have done? Not only that, our job isn't over until we figure out the source of the issue. You see, in this instance, we went upstairs and we began looking around of why is there so much more moisture needing to be removed? So much so that the swag temperature drop was less than what was desired. And through some investigation, what we found out was in that building, two things were going on. The first, the fresh air return for that system was pulling over 150-degree air out of the unconditioned space in the attic upstairs. Hot, moist air that is being pulled directly into the evaporating unit, which you need to have. You need to have some fresh air coming in. So that wasn't bad. But the second part was worse. The second part was somewhere along the lines of that property throughout all the owners that had owned that particular community over the years, someone had removed all the insulation from the roof line that would help to keep the temperature and moisture down in that attic. In other words, the air conditioner was pulling directly to the evaporating coil over 150-degree, heavily moist air. That's why when it was charged correctly, I only had a 14-degree drop in the apartment. So you see, it was swag that began the process. It got me close in the ballpark, but because I was paying attention, I was able to adjust based on the conditions as they presented themselves in reality. See, I kind of use this thinking the same way that the 1 per 100 rule is. Even in both articles, the National Apartment Association, the one from 2020, and the updated version in 2022, both of them refer to the one maintenance technician per 100 rule as general. In other words, it's swag. It's Occam's razor. The simplest answer most often is the one that it is. You see, here's the thing. If a property has been performing regular preventive maintenance throughout its entire life, if a community is doing a good job on turns, the make ready maintenance, and if they're doing a good job on work orders, service requests, to where instead of going with band-aids or short, quick fixes, they are making the necessary repairs as soon as they're able, as soon as possible, and those repairs are completed all the way through, so no return visit is needed. If both of those things have happened throughout the the longevity of that community, then you may be able to do better manpower wise than 1 per 100. In other words, you could do one maintenance technician per 120. The other way to do that is to make more use of vendors. Now, good friend of mine, Mark Vanderhoof, my best friend, he has been in the apartment industry for a very, very long time. And he tells me stories of how they used to do every single thing in-house. Roofing, flooring, replacing joists underneath the subfloor. All of those items, he even installed carpet. They would install vinyl, tile, all of that stuff. We didn't vend any of that stuff out, he used to tell me. And in today's day and age, we vend out a lot more, meaning we hire contractors a lot more than what we used to do. Now, that 1 per 100 standard has been around for a long time. As of 2 years ago, the National Apartment Association poses the question, should it be changed due to centralization? I'll be honest, in my opinion, right now, the maintenance side of the house of the 1 per 100, I don't think we can change it yet. I think that is still a good swag. It is still a good general rule of thumb. Now, if we don't make use of vendors, if we don't make use of contractors, if we try and do things in-house based on our current labor pool, current amount of technicians and workers, based upon the overall general knowledge of people coming into the industry, and the types of training programs that we're using in general. Again, I'm using a lot of swag here. I honestly think that we are short staffing a lot of our communities for budgetary reasons. Going forward, centralization, workflow management, doing a lot of functions on the computer that can be automated using and taking advantage of AI. That, I think, is where we can change some things. I mean, a lot of times when I go around to properties, the phone is ringing less frequently. And when it is ringing, a lot of times what I'm seeing on properties of all different kinds and types, garden style, high rise, more rural, downtown areas, when I'm on these properties, there's not as much phone calls because residents or potential residents are making more and more use of online shopping for their upcoming apartments. I mean, we've outsourced writing a lot of work orders to chatbots or to apps on phones or email. All of those things are making our office side more efficient. So efficient that I think it's a realistic thing to begin to adjust headcount. The challenge is on the maintenance side of the house, as far as I know, there's not an app that runs a plunger. Now, I am not saying that we need to get rid of our office altogether. I think that is a huge mistake. But if we're looking at efficiency sizing, I admit I'm biased. I admit is some unintended thought process in that because I'm a maintenance guy. I love maintenance technicians. I want us all to succeed as maintenance technicians. But we're discussing the 1 per 100 rule, 1 per 100 for the office and 1 per 100 for maintenance. Now, there are some things that within the maintenance technician organization, on the maintenance side of our house, there are some things that we can do to help this process. First of all, stop deferring maintenance. Now, this will not result in an overnight ability to decrease maintenance teams. As a matter of fact, in the short term, not deferring maintenance may mean we actually need more headcount. We need more hands to put towards a problem that has been put off for too much time. Deferred maintenance, by that I mean water heaters that are beyond not only their warranty, but well beyond their expected life. That can change based on your market, based on your water source, based on a lot of variables. But in general terms, the swag for a water heater is warranty plus 3. Meaning if your warranty's up at 10 years for that water heater, really begin looking at replacing it at 13 years after it was done. Again, that's swag. That is not official. That is not a big number. It's a general rule. Some markets you may be able to go for longer. Other markets, maybe not. Generally speaking, the harder your water is, the closer to that warranty period you're going to be that we really need to consider replacing the water heater. How to make the water heater last longer? Flush it from the beginning. In other words, when we replace that water heater, every couple of years, go by and follow the manufacturer instructions to flush the water heater. That's not just drain it, flush out the calcium and all the sediment that forms in the water heater. The challenge is, if we don't do it from the beginning, you can actually shorten the life of that water heater later on in its life. In other words, if you go to flush a water heater that's already at the 10-year mark, you go to flush it, you could actually be shortening its life. This is one of the ways that we can begin to decrease our headcount on our properties. Actually perform deferred maintenance. Stop creating a problem. Now, let's go over some other examples. And I'd like to use, for many of these examples, I'd like to use the move-in, move-out process as a way of identifying how we can apply some specific rules to bring the 1 per 100 amount into closer focus. And by that, I mean, if your maintenance teams are overworked, meaning you really are looking to get to like 1 per 80 unit count. If we want to bring it back in line with that general rule, all the way back up to 1 per 100, a couple of ideas. First, be sure that you have communication between your departments, the maintenance team and the office team. There is a certain amount of work that has to occur each and every week. Because the majority of our maintenance teams are paid hourly, we have essentially 40 hours to complete that work. If your community is not doing or performing overtime for emergency callouts, How that works, I'm going to leave that up to you as far as if people go home early or you give days off. But here's the reason why I say understanding expectations between departments can lead to more efficient use of time. In other words, if we have an expectation that maintenance will perform a pre-move out inspection, that means that somebody from the maintenance department goes into our resident's apartment 2, 3, 4 weeks before the resident moves out. That gives us the ability as a team, both office and maintenance, to know what that make ready turn process is going to look like. You can see that bright Barbie bubblegum pink wall that was painted by your resident so that we can determine how many layers of primer, how many layers of paint. And on the financial side, we can charge that to our resident, where in the lease it said they have to return that apartment back to us in the condition it was turned over to them in, minus normal wear and tear. Well, bubblegum pink is not normal wear and tear. On the second side of it, not the financial side, but the physical work side for our maintenance team, we can schedule it because bubblegum pink, you're talking at least 2 coats of primer and maybe 3 or 4 coats of paint. That means it's return trips. There is more time involved for our contractor if we're subbing it out or if we're doing it in-house. That amount of time has to be allotted for. Because we're doing that in that apartment, we can no longer, during that same amount of time that we're painting the walls over and over in our imaginary apartment, we can't be solving work orders or running tickets or doing anything else that is normal. If we're in that apartment before the move out, we can actually determine that. And that's how it can be. Now, the other thing to consider, use more contractors. In the imaginary event of that bubblegum pink wall, we could actually use a painter to do that. Someone that their job is all painting. They will be as efficient as possible. Our maintenance teams, by and large, we're generalists. We can paint, but it will take us longer to do the same type of job. At the end of the day, if we use contractors or vendors, painters, in this example, we can decrease lost rent. If we use our in-house team, we can decrease the invoice spend. There's trade-offs both directions. But if we're looking at that 1 per 100 rule, using contractors is a way to bring it back in line. Another one I kind of did bring up earlier, and that is adjusting our workflows. Now, when we talk about adjusting the workflows, yes, it can be done through technology, through an app, using a mobile application. I mean, there are things, I've used them in the past. You've got services like Monday.com, which is a project management tool. You've got Smart Sheets, which is like Excel in a mobile format with a lot of steroids behind it. I mean, both of which work for their job, and they can help make us as maintenance technicians more efficient and more organized. They're great. But actually, the workflows I would like to propose is that we take that everybody understanding and communicating what the expectations are to one more step. In other words, we ask ourselves, what is an example of something that by adjusting a method or process, we can save manpower or time and still get accomplished? The first one that comes to mind for me is something I saw on a property a few years ago, and I think it is brilliant. You see, Kwikset has a product called Smart Lock. It is a deadbolt lock that can be rekeyed using A very, very tiny tool. You stick the tool in, turn the key 90 degrees, the old key 90 degrees, pull the old key out, put the new key in, turn it 180 degrees, pull the tool out, put the key back straight up and down, pull the key out, and you've just rekeyed the lock. What this property did that I thought was so unique was they trained their leasing team how to do or perform that. In other words, instead of the maintenance department spending the time necessary to put together a move-in key packet and have it in one central location, what this property did was they had a box of core keys in the office that the office team had. The maintenance team at move out, they would put that apartment onto a vendor key or a vacant key. You may have heard either one of those terminologies interchangeably. And what that means is the entire time that that apartment was vacant, it was on one key that all the vacant apartments were keyed to. That meant that if a key was checked out to a painter or flooring or a contractor of any type, they checked out one key. They only had to keep track of one key for all the vacant apartments that they went into. Not only that, the maintenance team at any point in time could go into any of the vacant apartments without having to go to the office and check out a key because they were all on a vacant key. I'll go one step further. By doing this, that apartment stayed on the vacant key until move-in. And I don't mean the day of move-in, I mean the exact move-in. That has two very big benefits. The first is that once the apartment was ready and turned over to the office for them to manage, all the maintenance done, all the painting, all the cleaning, it's ready for move-in today. That apartment sits until somebody moves in. And that means that while the office is on a tour, if they're talking with a resident about an apartment, they can take the resident to the potential ready apartment for them to see the exact apartment, and they can do it while they're out on the tour path without having to go all the way back to the office to get another key that they didn't happen to grab before they left because it's still on a vacant lock. The second benefit of doing this is during the move-in process, the resident, the prospective resident, changing from prospective to our actual resident, when they sign that lease, after the paperwork is done, or even they take the resident to their brand new apartment and do the paperwork in the apartment. I'll leave it to you to decide which is best. But when the leasing professional takes our new resident to the office, from the office to the vacant apartment, right in front of the resident, they see the lock being rekeyed from the original vacant lock to their new key that nobody else has used, nobody else has had access to before that very moment. In other words, it becomes a great method for reassuring our resident that it is theirs. Now, here's just a couple of things. These were a couple of ideas on how we can adjust or right size away from our swag razor. The 1 per 100 rule, I got to be honest, I don't think it's going anywhere soon. But it is an interesting way that, just like my air conditioning problem, I began with the swag and that got me in the ballpark. But I didn't take it. I did research. I actually got data based on how it was designed and how it is supposed to function. So, where did that swag come from? 1 maintenance per 100. Where did it come from? My best guess is experience. Over a period of time, management companies, managers, owners, investors, all of these places saw that in general, one maintenance team member per 100 units works, and in general, one office team member per 100 units works. So swag was born. So, Derek, first of all, thank you for bringing up that question. It's a fascinating thing to talk about, and I'm grateful that you brought it up. I'm very, very thankful that you actually wrote in to ask the question. The second piece of that is to turn it around. If you're listening today and you have a question or a topic or something that you would like a maintenance mindset applied to, write in. Multifamily Media Network on our webpage. We've got both a contact us section, and there's even a place where you can record a short voicemail or, I think, a quick video to ask your question. I and any of the other hosts on the network are eager to have a conversation with you and apply our thoughts and experiences to your query or to your idea. Who knows? Maybe one day it becomes swag or maybe a razor. Thanks again. I'll see you somewhere.